America's waters swimmable and fishable. 30 years and $100 billion later, we still have 300,000 miles of polluted rivers and 5 million acres of polluted lakes. Iowa is no exception with 188 polluted water bodies. Our own Iowa River is one of these. In Iowa, we've drained 95% of our wetlands, cleared 70% of our forests, destroyed 99% of our prairies, and committed 90% of our land to agriculture. At least half of our famous topsoil has wasted away due to erosion over the past 150 years, and we continue to squander this resource with outdated farming practices that make Iowa a national hotspot for highly erodible soil. These problems don't just fall on our own shoulders as our polluted, nutrient-rich waters run off down to the Gulf of Mexico, and future generations will struggle to be feeding the 9 billion people of the projected estimates of the population without all the topsoil that we once had. Welcome to Iowa City's Other News. The topic of today's show, Iowa Garden of Eden, or environmental nightmare. Today we'll take a critical look at Iowa's environment with guests Mary Skopek from the Iowa DNR and Del Holland from Environmental Advocates. But before we dive into those environmental topics, let's first take a look at a current issue. We'll go to the Coral Trailer Park in Coralville, where residents have been given a raw deal.
Coral Trailer Park's 41 residents were given only 2 months to vacate their homes after they learned the park's owner, Alan Sabah, had sold the park to the city of Coralville. Homeowners who are unable to relocate their trailers are leaving them behind. Not only are they losing their homes, they must pay Sabah $800 to destroy them. The city of Coralville is refusing to assist the residents, some of Coralville's poorest, with relocation costs. The residents have filed a lawsuit in Johnson County District Court in an attempt to recoup their moving costs. Deborah Johnson is already near homelessness and is living with her mother, Laura Johnson, who is being evicted. We talked with them and a few of the remaining residents on Sunday, July 29th.
This is Carrie Wilson for Public Access is the Other News. Please state your name.
Laura Johnson.
Okay. And how many are in your household here?
2, as of right now.
Do you have any children?
My daughter and her son were living with us, and she's in the process of looking for another place also.
Okay. And how long have you lived here?
A year.
Okay. And how did you find out that you were losing your residence?
Through the paper, as a matter of fact. Basically, everybody in the trailer park found out that it had been sold through the paper, and that was June 12th, I do believe. I still have the article.
Okay. And when were you notified, if you were notified, by the owner or the city of Coralville?
When it was in the paper.
Okay. And when are they giving you a date as far as moving out?
We are supposed to be out by July 1st, but there's a few of the families that won't be out by the 1st because of the fact we had 2 months notice.
Right. Okay. And do you have any place to live yet to relocate to?
As of right this moment, no.
Okay. What is your estimation of your moving expenses or your losses that would be incurred because of this event?
Oh, I would say at least a total of $6,000 for my home, they're just going to tear down. I mean, it's not going to be there.
Okay. And have you been able to sell or relocate your mobile home?
No, mine is too old and it's not wide enough for any of the trailer parks located in Iowa City, Coralville, unless I wanted to move towards Burlington.
Okay. Comment on your thoughts or feelings or the reparations that you feel that must be made because of this.
Oh, I feel that the city needs to reimburse people and relocate them, or at least help relocate us. There's homes that have been here over 10 to 12 years. These people are losing their homes, and they're just like totally devastated too. You know, they've been here 10, 12 years, and now all of a sudden, 2 months, you have to leave your home.
Right.
You have to relocate yourself, and I mean, we're not people that are making $1 million a year. I mean, we're lucky if we can make $33,000 a year, you know, let alone what some of these businesses do make, and why they have to take our homes away from us. And then they don't even have to explain themselves to us or anyone else. That, I feel, is very, very unfair. And the children that have been in these homes, they go to these schools. Now they have to go to new schools, make new friends. That's scary for any kid.
Okay. All right, please state your name.
Deborah Johnson.
Okay. And what is your estimation of your moving expenses or any losses that you've incurred from this?
Quite a bit. I mean, it's going to take me at least $1,000 just to get into a new apartment with rent and deposit. But I mean, I haven't lived here long, so I mean, it's kind of. I'm ready to move.
Yeah. Okay. Please state your name.
Vicki Stanley.
What is your estimation of your moving expenses or the losses that you've incurred by the sale of this property?
Probably, this trailer is a 74, so there's very few places it can be moved to, and we didn't find anybody to buy it. So, and we just put like $10,000 into it from the old insides remodel, whole brand new kitchen and everything, whirlpool tub. But we're losing it. We can't take it with us, so we're gonna just lose all that. So probably $10,000-15,000.
Comment on your thoughts and feelings or the reparations that you feel should be made in this situation.
Well, my thoughts are that, it was a pretty crappy deal when they gave us 60 days. I mean, it's almost impossible to get everything taken care of in 60 days when you lived someplace 15 years, The city supposedly said we had a year, but yet they signed a contract with the trailer court owner that said we had 60 days to get out, So basically the city and the trailer court owner both dumped on us and said get out in 60 days. So I just don't think it's right. I mean, it would be nice if we had some compensation to the losses. We're all losing a lot. I mean, not necessarily just me, but everybody's losing either their home or a halfway decent, cheap place to live, or having to go to something more expensive. I would say Coralville's not exactly cheap to live in.
Yeah. And who do you feel is actually responsible for the cost of relocation and reparations?
I really think the trailer court owner is, because he's the one who approached the city to sell the property, and he's just getting us all out of here, and he could have given us more time. I mean, if he'd have given us more time, it would have been a lot easier to take care of a lot of the business that we had to take care of. So, but he just wants his money. He wants to get us out.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome back to Iowa City's Other News. Cable 18, thanks for tuning in. You just saw the Coral Trailer Park where residents are being evicted without much notice at all. Not only that, but the city of Coralville bought it, leveled it, and is planning to level it with no specific plans for development. Definitely a raw deal for those residents. Let's turn now to the main topic of today's show. We're looking at Iowa's environment. We're going to start it off by talking to where we met up with two local residents, Jane Yoder Short and her daughter Ida, in College Green Park, where they told us about what they thought about cars and oil.
It was a hot day, and the fastest we were going on that day was, I'd say, 20 miles an hour.
We were surrounded by big trucks, and our air conditioning didn't work, and we had the windows down and the air stinks.
And the stinking air reminded us that motor vehicles are the biggest cause of air pollution.
We knew that cars and trucks pollute, but we all keep driving.
Yeah, it's because a status symbol. Cars are kind of, you got a nice car, people notice you. It's sort of like when you hit a home run and everybody looks at you and they're kind of, oh, wow.
Everybody looks at us because our car is ugly.
Well, I was talking about society in general. Ivan Illich wrote a book, Energy and Equity. And in that book, he says the typical American male spends 1,600 hours a year on his car. Now, this is to wash it, wax it, all those things, plus the money he needs for the down payment and to keep making the payments. And this typical person then drives 7,500 miles that year. And so if we do the math, it comes out to about 5 miles an hour.
I can walk that fast, can't I?
You can walk that fast. But the problem is we can't walk everywhere we want to get. So we have cars, and they're nice because they take us where we want to go, when we want to go, and we ride with the people we want to ride with. If we ride the bus, we don't have any choice who we are riding with. And trains don't take us exactly where we want to go.
I think riding a train would be fun.
But cars are just so convenient, and they seem so cheap to operate.
You call sitting in your car convenient? Remember when we went to Chicago?
But it's not always like that. Most of the time we zoom along, but that time they were fixing the road.
It's good they fixed the road. Your cars could cause accidents.
But see, fixing the road is one of the things we forget that it costs. We forget a lot of things. We forget that it costs to make the roads. We forget it costs to fix the roads. We forget that we have to pay for the highway patrol people to keep us from speeding. We forget the cost of accidents. We forget the health costs. We forget the costs related to pollution.
We forget a lot of things, but one thing we do know is the price of gas. I've heard you complain about the price of gas.
I shouldn't complain because the price we pay at the gas tank when we pump gas is about half of the actual cost. We don't pay for a lot of the costs connected with oil drilling, and we don't pay for a big cost of this whole military spending that protects our oil interest.
Has anyone ever totaled up all the costs?
You know, somebody tried to do that. The Conservation Law Foundation did it in Boston, and they figured it costs like 80 to 95 cents a mile to run your car. At that rate, it costs us like $400 to drive to Chicago and back. Now that makes cars and buses seem a lot less expensive. But the problem is the government pays part of that, so it doesn't seem like we're paying the $400. It's sort of like when your big brother wants to go to the movies, and the ticket cost is sort of beyond his budget, so I go half with him, and I pay half the movie cost, and then the movie doesn't seem so expensive.
Well, when I grow up, I think I might still want a car.
Well, we are making enough that you can probably have one, because for every 2 babies born, we manufacture a car. And that manufacturing a car has its own pollution cost. But then we turn right around, and every year we throw away 9 million passenger vehicles.
That's a lot of junk.
It is, but we're sort of trapped. We need our cars. We need them to go to work, to buy groceries. We just don't seem to find, we hear the facts and we just don't seem to be able to change.
Well, I think if there are fast trains with swimming pools on board, I might change my mind about wanting the car.
I've never heard of a train with a swimming pool, but I do know that in France and Japan, they have these fast, high-speed trains that pollute less and take up less space. We just need to do some more creative thinking. But it's so hard when we're so connected, we just think cars. So it's almost like we're addicted to cars. We need some kind of maybe detox center where autoholics recover.
What?
Oh, I'm just wishing we wouldn't depend so much on cars.
Well, everyone should just go to Chicago and sit there for an hour and smell the bad air. Maybe then they would drive less.
Well, maybe they would. I don't know. Our air smells bad enough. There's an old Turkish proverb that says, no matter how far you've gone down the wrong road, turn around. We've invested a lot of time and energy in cars, but it's not too late to start dreaming of doing transportation other ways.
Like trains with swimming pools.
Like trains with swimming pools.
All right, thanks Jane and Ida, that was great. Great information about cars. It turns out cars also play a big role in environmental water quality. The National Academy of Science tells us that the runoff from cars, the oil runoff from cars into our coastal areas in 8 months is equivalent to one Exxon Valdez spill. So environmental water quality becomes a big issue too, which is what we're going to turn to now with our two guests. Thanks for coming on the air. This is Del Holland, Chair of Environmental Advocates, and Mary Skopek, Research Geologist and Section Supervisor of the Iowa DNR's Water Monitoring Section. I get that one right?
Yes, you did.
All right. Well, thanks both of you for coming on the air.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Start out and maybe, Del, tell us a little bit about environmental advocates in terms of what you do. You've mentioned that it's a catalyst for environmental action in this area.
Yeah, it's an organization that's been around for about 10 or 12 years, I guess actually more than 10. We had a 10th anniversary a few years ago. So, and what we like to do is serve as a way to help people bring ideas they've got about making changes to improve the environment to fruition. And so people come to us and work with us and hopefully get things done. So we started a long time ago with the issue of recycling. Where before Iowa City had any recycling, members of the community, through environmental advocates, thought we need to do something about that. And so they decided to build some little buildings and arranged a deal with City Carton to pick up things that were dropped in these buildings that were placed at grocery stores. And it was the beginning of recycling in Iowa City.
Good stuff.
Yeah, we
Sounds
think so.
Yeah. Great. Well, it sounds like Environmental Advocates is doing great work. How about DNR? Mary, can you give us an overview of what kind of work you're doing there and how the DNR is working to improve our environment?
Sure. Well, the DNR, of course, is a very large organization, but our part of it is the water monitoring program. And until about 1999, Iowa really didn't do a very good job monitoring their waters. Partly it was a lack of funds, and I think partly it was a lack of wanting to know what was really in our water. So starting with 1999, the legislature and the governor started to appropriate monies. We now monitor intensively a lot of our streams that have never been looked at before for things like the oils that you were discussing, looking at the biological health of the streams as well. So how are our bugs doing? How are our fish doing? And then also trying to understand how what we're doing to the landscape is changing our water quality. It's very difficult to understand how things have changed over the last century or 20 years when you don't really have that data to show you that. So we're trying to figure out whether our water quality is getting better or worse. And one of our projects right now is looking at a statewide nutrient budget, trying to understand how we're doing with our nutrients, what's applied to the farm fields, is that getting into our water quality, and then what kinds of problems are we having as a result of it.
Great. Well, one of the things you're looking at is nutrients and biologic quality, integrity of the streams. We've got some footage now from Liz McDade, who did some work on fish in our local streams. Let's see what she has to say. But before we see that, what kind of studies would you do to determine how the fish are doing in the streams? How do you monitor that?
It's very difficult to monitor the fish, which is why a lot of times we do is take out what's called a electroshocking barge or backpack. And we go out, or the fisheries people go out, and they actually shock the fish in the water. They float to the surface, and then they can do counts of the fish, what types of fish, are we seeing problems with endangerment, and then also looking at whether there's any health effects on those fish. Do we see lesions? Do we see parasites, anything like that? And then we also look at the insects in the stream. So the insects really can't move. Those little aquatic bugs can't move very much, and so if they're not healthy, then we have a problem with the water quality, and we look at both sides of the biota to figure out whether or not we're having a problem with our water quality.
Wow, okay. All right, so that's how they find out. Let's see now what Liz found out about the fish.
Iowans like seafood. After spending a little time at our grocery stores and at the Iowa River, it's clear that we like fish. In fact, fishing is one of the biggest participant sports in the state of Iowa. What's unclear is how safe our local fish are to eat and the impact that our seafood desires have on the environment. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources monitors the safety of Iowa's fish and puts out a fish advisory if fish are unsafe to eat from certain locations. There are currently 2 fish advisories out in the state of Iowa. So the local fish are okay to eat, but does that mean that we should enjoy as much seafood as we like? According to the Department of Natural Resources, Iowans' love of seafood and environmental degradation has almost completely wiped out the Iowan native brook trout. Historically, the brook trout flourished in 105 Iowan streams. With the increase in settlers to Iowa, that number has gone down to 4 streams. To understand the oceans and coastal zones, we turn to a national organization. According to a recent report by the Pew Oceans Commission, our love of seafood has made and continues to make dramatic changes to the environment. The Pew Commission is an independent group of scientists, fishermen, elected officials, and conservationists whose mission is to identify policies and practices to restore and protect our living marine resources and to raise public awareness. Their recently released report, which is available at www.pewoceans.org, listed the 9 major threats that face our oceans. 5 of these 9 threats were directly related to fishing and the fishing industry. For example, 30% of the fish populations that have been assessed are overfished, fished unsustainably, or both. Here in Iowa, our choices as consumers affect the oceans in many ways. Our farming practices and lawn care, for example, affect the ocean through runoff into our lakes, streams, and rivers, which carry our nitrates, mainly from fertilizer, to the coastal zones. Organic farming and organic lawn care results in lower nitrates headed to the ocean. Our choices of seafood also make an impact. The Monterey Bay Aquarium publishes a seafood watch that classifies many of our popular choices of seafood into 3 categories. The best choices category includes those fish which are currently being fished at a sustainable level. Some of these include farmed abalone, catfish, white sea bass, and wild-caught Californian and Alaskan salmon. Ask at your local grocery store if they carry the fish on the best choices category, and try to avoid the fish in the avoid category. Don't be afraid to ask at restaurants where their fish come from and how they were caught. If they don't know, consider ordering something else. For your own copy of the Seafood Watch, go to www.montereybayaquarium.org. Let's look now at how Iowa City residents enjoy their seafood.
Right. Fish tacos looks pretty good to me, and sustainably fished fish tacos even better. Okay, so Del, we've got a situation here with our fisheries declining, and now it seems like it's connected to what we're doing in Iowa as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what the problem is with our runoff here, and how are we getting the word out to the community through maybe environmental advocates education programs?
Sure. I think as the piece well pointed out, a big issue is the runoff from our lands, both urban and farmlands, and the nutrients that get into the streams and end up both enriching the streams and causing problems there, and then eventually ending up in the Gulf of Mexico, where they also cause problems. And Environmental Advocates encourages its members to get knowledgeable about these things through articles in a newsletter, through a program that Mary's been instrumental in getting going called Iowa Water, which incorporates citizen monitoring of stream water quality. And we have had programs where we invited our members or anyone in the community to come see how that's done, learn how that's done, learn how to hook up with Mary and her programs.
Outstanding. Okay, and Mary, you know, part of the research that Liz did for that piece is she went out to the Fairport Hatchery and met with Ken Snyder out there, the fisheries biologist out there. The Fairport Hatchery raises fish to stock in our streams, farm ponds, things like that. And he talked about the hatcheries, at least in the foreseeable future, being a permanent part of our fisheries management. Can you see us getting to a point where our water quality is good enough to support fisheries without having to artificially inseminate our, you know, natural waters with fish?
Boy, that's an interesting question. I don't know in the foreseeable future whether that'll happen. We have seen, as she pointed out in that article, that some of our fisheries are rebounding, and especially in Northeast Iowa. You know, 10 years ago, we didn't have naturally reproducing brook trout. We have now, I think it's up to 10 streams that they think have naturally reproducing trout. And a lot of it's been the efforts of the fisheries biologists. They've gone in, they've put in habitat structures, and then a lot of keeping the sediment out, because as that sediment fills in the streams, the fish can't spawn properly, it hurts their gills. So we are seeing some good progress in that part of the state, but that part of the state is not as intensively row cropped as a lot of parts of the state. And you know, a lot of the native populations outside of Northeast Iowa were not necessarily trout, but were other fish. And it's difficult to see that we're going to get to that point where we have naturally native producing fisheries anymore, because we have such problems with carp, for example, being in our streams, causing problems. They outcompete about every other fish that we have. So it's difficult to think that Iowa's going to just do away with the fisheries, that everything's going to be okay. But there are some glimmers of hope, I think, on the horizon, as I said, especially in Northeast Iowa.
What would it take? I mean, are the CRP program, somehow removing the carp, like, you know, if you had the biggest budget, you know, if everyone was on the in with your plan, what would it take to make that happen?
Well, getting rid of carp is very difficult. They tried to get rid of carp around Clear Lake, and you essentially have to poison the lake or the marsh to get rid of the carp, and that's not good because, well, it was good in that case because they were able to work on the lake, but it's not always popular because you pretty much kill most of the fish, and that's not usually something people want to do. So you want to do it in an isolated area, in that case in a marsh. So getting rid of the carp is very difficult, but I think continuing to do the things that we've done in terms of putting in good habitat along the stream, keeping the sediment out, which is our #1 problem in the state still, is we have too much sediment, and a lot of it is over 200 years of farming. All that sediment is moved down into the streams, and it's just being reworked. So we have to figure out how to get that sediment to either be stabilized or not moving around as much and not causing problems. And then putting in more buffers. We're kind of into a working environment. We like to do everything right up to the water's edge, and we need to think about backing away, having buffer strips, either grass or trees, and that really helps the fisheries a lot, because when it's not covered, when the stream's not covered, the water gets very warm, and that's not good for fish. So the more we can put in buffers, the better off we are, and right now, less than 1% of our streams have a buffer. So we have a lot of work to do in that regard.
So I'm assuming they don't have buffers because that land is being farmed? Is that
farmed or pastured, or, you know, as you look in Iowa City, look at, you know, a lot of our streams. Iowa River, for example, we have buildings right up to the water's edge.
Mm-hmm.
We need to think about really putting a buffer between any activity that we have on the land surface and that water's edge. So any variety of activities are too close to the stream.
For the farming case, which is what people hammer on farms a lot. I hear that a lot. Is it reasonable for us to ask the farmers to back up off the streams? Can they still make a living, or do we have to, I don't know, create some new program to fund them enough to be able to back off the streams? What's the solution?
Well, there are some new programs, and some of the new wetland easements allow farmers to put that land into an easement, still continue to get paid for that land, but not farm it. In their best economic interest, it doesn't make sense to farm land that traditionally floods at least once every year, once in 2 years, for example. So I think that a lot of farmers are farming in the floodplains where they shouldn't necessarily be, because economically they want to get that crop, but at the same time there are programs available to get them out that they don't have flood damage, for example, and then we have that buffer. It's very difficult. Iowa, agricultural land is at a premium, and we've had 40 years or 50 years of farm programs to try and help farmers. I think we need to be a little bit more careful with how we decide to give away money, and so that we get economic benefit as well as environmental benefit, and that's always a difficult balance to strike.
I want to say something about, I think urban residents also have a responsibility related to this, though, and we're guilty of covering the land surface with all kinds of impervious things, whether it be parking lots or buildings or whatever, which causes the flow into the streams to be faster, which increases this erosion. And there are some things that we can do which make that better. An example is a kind of parking lot surface which allows some permeability, and that way the water runs into the ground instead of rushing off through the sewers and into the streams and rivers. So.
And if I could follow up on that, one of Iowa's most interesting streams is McLeod Run in Cedar Rapids, which is an urban trout stream. And it's a naturally groundwater fed stream, but we put an interstate and a railroad track, and now we have a trail there that gets pesticide use on. And we're trying to bring that back to a trout stream, but it's in a very heavily urbanized area, and there's some industry there. So Dell's right. I mean, the things that we do in the cities also impact some of our fisheries that naturally were quite productive.
Okay. Well, on that note, let's look a little bit, look into more of what happens in the cities. We've got some footage from Brandon Ross, a community member who has something to say about pesticide use in Iowa City.
Anytime you see a yellow flag or a white flag that says do not walk on the lawn for 24 hours, that usually indicates that carcinogens and neurotoxins are being applied. These do not disappear within 24 hours. These actually can stay in the lawn for 2 months. And if children and dogs, pets are running around on there, they're going to pick this up. These signs over here, the University of Northern Iowa has got a program trying to eliminate lawn chemicals that are cosmetic, that cause cancer and neurologic diseases. These signs were created by many groups. There are many kinds around. They just echo the concern of people who are trying to make a statement about not using pesticides, trying to protect their children, their pets, trying to protect their environment, their drinking water supplies.
All right. Thanks, Brandon. I mean, those signs look great. Here at Iowa City's Other News in our graphics department, we had our creative team put together a sign, not for people without pesticides, but those with the pesticide lawns. Just one that might be more, can you get this? Can you get? We got some of the animals here that pets, thumbs down for the weeds, thumbs up for carcinogens. So if you like this design, check it out. Feel free to reproduce it at home.
But another more positive way that Environmental Advocates has been involved with this is we encourage the Yards for Kids folks to come down from UNI to do a program to talk about their program of lessing urban spraying on parks and green areas that we all use. If you can get on the website under Yards for Kids and check them out and find out about the program that they've got.
Yeah, that sounds outstanding. Yards for Kids. I guess there's also lawn care companies like Safe Earth out of Iowa that the founders, apparently their dog died. Their vet said it was probably due to lawn chemicals, so they started a company. There's cities that have regulated this.
Environmental Advocates was actually involved in the program and encouraged the City Council of Iowa City to pass an ordinance that was stricter about use of urban chemicals. And we passed that ordinance about 10 years ago. And then the state legislature came in and preempted that and said that the city could not do that. So I was kind of disappointed to see the power of the large chemical companies take away local control when we were trying to protect our own citizens.
And I think the time is right now to revisit that with your local legislator, because with the nutrient report that I was talking about earlier, one of the things that the legislature is talking about is having local control in areas that are sensitive. So where you have a lake or stream that's sensitive, being able to let cities say, we're not going to have high phosphorus fertilizers or other lawn chemicals. So I think the climate is starting to turn, so that if people are interested in that, contact your legislator and tell them that you're interested in having some local control over the application of those pesticides and fertilizers.
Good stuff. Yeah, definitely. Or, you know, what are some, the website you described, if we don't want to wait for the government, how can we take care of our lawns now, make them look nice, but without chemicals?
Well, I think, to me, the big thing is a paradigm shift on what look nice is.
What looks nice.
And I actually find unmanicured prairie to be probably the most beautiful representation of Iowa. And so there are groups, I'm trying to think of the name of it, Wild Rose is a local chapter of a group that encourages prairies as lawns instead of this manicured bluegrass. And the nice thing about a native prairie is it's maintenance free, and you don't have to put pesticides on, you don't have to mow it, you don't have to put herbicides on. So I guess I'd say that's the biggest shift, is that if you can go to that kind of a land cover, then you're better off. And I think there's an interesting thing going on right now. The Waterworks Park at the new Waterworks Park here in Iowa City was originally set up to have a prairie area all on the land there, a prairie park around it. And this spring, in the budget process, the city had to cut the funding for the prairie seeding of most of that park area. And I think that's unfortunate, because it's, you know, it would be this relatively maintenance-free and of course an area that you don't have to put pesticides and so forth on. So it would be nice to see the city come back to revisit that area and think about putting the money back to do the seeding of that area.
That would be great. That would be great. Let's see. In terms of water monitoring, I know the United States Geological Survey, they did a national assessment of our water bodies, and in general, they found agricultural areas to have lots of water quality problems. But when it came to insecticides, diazinon, malathion insecticides such as these, they occurred more frequently and at higher concentrations in urban areas than agricultural streams. Not only that, but the concentrations of these insecticides exceeded at least one guideline in every sampled urban stream of this NAQUA study. Mm-hmm. Now, you have your own, you've worked kind of in conjunction with this and worked on a separate Iowa State database of pesticides. What do you see happening in urban streams as far as pesticides is happening versus agricultural streams?
Well, again, monitoring in urban streams has not been as common as it has been in some other states, but what we do find is yes, some of those insecticides are showing up, not probably as frequently as in other states, because we haven't had the industrial base that some of these other states have had. But when we look, we do find them, not frequently, but in concentrations that might be impacting the biota. Again, those aquatic insects are very sensitive to that. What we've tended to find in the state is that some of those insecticides were also used on croplands, but through the last 10 to 20 years, we've really gone to something called integrated pest management, where we don't just go out there and spray because you might have a corn borer. We go in, we test the farm fields and look for that corn borer and then spray. The same sorts of things should be applied to our urban lawns. Don't just spray because you don't want to maybe have a problem. Identify that you do have a problem, spot treat it and not just blanket your entire lawn. The same can be said of things like termite control. Some of these are termite control program insecticides. What we're finding is that blanket spraying around the basement doesn't necessarily help, that some of the things like trapping the termites away and then dealing with the termites in a different way is actually more effective than just spraying, because they'll just go around and find some other way.
More effective.
It's more effective. And so, again, we need to be a little bit more clever about how we treat insects than to just blanket spray. I will say in this state, we still love our pesticides and especially our herbicides. And I think we have a legacy of using those for 20 or 30 years. We're still seeing some of those compounds hanging around many, many years after they were applied. So I think whenever we apply something, we need to think about, if it doesn't break down quickly, we may be thinking about it 20 or 30 years from now. And so it's not just you spray it, it looks like it's gone, it is gone. They can hang around for a very, very long time.
Well, I think a classic of that is the lake that McLeod Run flows into in Cedar Rapids, Cedar Lake, is one of the ones that has a big problem with chloridane, which was used to treat termites quite a while ago. It's been outlawed for a long time, and yet the levels in the fish mussels are so high that there's warning signs that you should not eat the fish there because of the carcinogenic consequences. So yes, it's long-term consequences of these things.
So we've got to be more clever. Listen to environmental advocates, listen to the DNR. They've got the clever strategies. Let's look to another issue now. Environmental justice is another topic that we should be concerned about when thinking about environmental problems. Just like we saw the Coral Trailer Park people getting a raw deal because they had less money and less influence, often you also see people getting a raw environmental deal. They're exposed to environmental health hazards because of their race, their nationality, the amount of money they have, their influence. We were able to catch up with Proteus, which is a statewide organization that provides services for migrant farm workers, and we asked them a couple questions about migrant farm workers and their environmental health issues.
Okay. Well, one of the biggest questions that we ask on our health survey is if they deal with pesticides. And a lot of employers, it's a requirement by the EPA that anybody that works with pesticides, whether it's direct placement on a field or it's working in the field, they have to be certified as to knowing what the chemicals are, what they can do, what they need to do if they have, a rash or if they're exposed. And a lot of employers don't require that of farm workers. And for various reasons, the main reason is they don't speak Spanish, so they can't train them. They're just excuses. They have to be trained. I mean, people have to know what they're getting exposed to. That is my biggest concern, is that a lot of these farm workers are getting exposed to chemicals that they don't even know about, and they get them all over their clothes, their skin, they breathe them. So I think air quality is probably the #1 problem. Studies that have been done through similar programs throughout the U.S. have shown that farm workers have a higher prevalence of asthma and respiratory disorders. And they think, that's because of all the pesticides that they work around. And it's very common in farmers in general, farm hands.
Well, that was interesting stuff from Adam Brown at the Muscatine office of Proteus. We're basically seeing that migrant farm workers deal with pesticides, chemicals, contaminating drinking water. It affects hundreds of thousands of migrant farm workers. Proteus is one good example of an organization trying to provide these people with the training, the education, and the health services they need to have a better environment and better environmental health. For your organizations, environmental advocates and DNR, what kind of environmental justice issues come up, maybe even with migrant farm workers? Have you dealt with these kind of issues in Iowa? Either of you?
No.
No.
I can't remember that we have. But it's certainly an issue. And of course, it's not only the migrant farm workers, it's all farm workers. And You know, it's an economic issue in that the guys driving the spray trucks are usually not real rich people, you know, and so, and as the commentator there said, they often don't know what they're being exposed to. But even if they knew, they don't have much choice but to go ahead and do this job because it's a job. And so the economic pressures are kind of tough, that people down at the bottom of economics end up exposing themselves to chemicals that may have long-term consequences.
And I think one of the farm worker issues that we have right now is in those large confined feeding operations for, say, hogs. We know that the levels of some chemicals are very high, and so they're exposed to high levels of sulfates and ammonias. And we tried recently, the DNR tried to pass some air quality rules that were actually not within buildings, but ambient air quality rules for the general populace. And there was a lot of opposition to that for a variety of reasons, but the people that are working in those buildings are subject to a variety of health problems. And I think, you know, we tend to say that the farmers choose to do this line of work and we don't put them under the same protections. But it is an issue, and it is an environmental justice issue I think that we need to be concerned about, that we don't just say, well, you decided to work there, tough, you just have to deal with it. So, I mean, that's the one sort of farm worker issue I can think of that really hasn't been addressed very well in the state so far.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one. It seems like we've got a lot of resources, or at least a good amount of resources in Iowa to improve our environment. You've got minority groups that may be affected differently than the majority. How do you, again, out to both of you, how do you prioritize, you know, how to spend our resources? What do you see as the major issues, and how would you do you see changes in how you'd like the resources used?
Well, I guess I'll answer first because I'm broader in it. And I guess what I see is that I'd like to encourage people to take a hold of a little piece where they feel like they can have some impact and follow up on that. So an example of that is the program that the DNR is running, the Iowa Water Program again, where citizens are trained to do stream monitoring and can build this database of information that the state then has to know a baseline about how the water quality is throughout the state. And so that's a very accessible thing that citizens can do to have an impact on the long-term quality of life in Iowa.
Yeah, and as far as, boy, how would I change our priorities? I don't know that we necessarily need to change our priorities. I think that we need to put more priority on our water quality, our air quality in general. There's a lot of things that are out there that we haven't even begun to think about. And the one kind of environmental justice that hit me as we were sitting here was the coal gasification plant that's sitting on, essentially on Ralston Creek. And, you know, whether we should deal with that, how much we should remediate that, I think is somewhat a result of who's going to be living over that. When it's students living over that, do we have the same priority as if it's a multi-million-dollar house that we try to put there? So there are lots of things, lots of needs in the state, and you know, there's something like 150 coal gasification plants that were built in the turn of the century that are long legacy of contaminated groundwater and surface water. That's something that we need to put some priority on. Our underground storage tanks that are leaking. A lot of those we've written off because we just simply don't have the money to remediate them. We've just decided that they're not affecting anybody right now. We're just going to walk away from it, or at least wait until there's a better technology. And so I think that we just haven't put a lot of emphasis on water quality and air quality and land quality in the state. It's time, I think, to really get serious about looking at these problems, putting our money where our mouth is, and going after these problems. Because our legacy is the land, and if we don't take care of it, it'll hurt us in the end.
You heard it here, prioritizing air quality, water quality. Thanks so much, both of you, for all this great input. You're watching Iowa City's Other News. We're talking about Iowa's environment. Now on the show is when we do our editorial. We call it Where's the Outrage? Adam Burke from the Iowa City Other News Collective will be talking to us today.
Hello, I'm Adam Burke, Iowa City Other News Collective. This is the regular, semi-regular segment on our show called Where's the Outrage? And this week I'm outraged that we haven't gotten any good feedback, or any feedback really about the show. So I'm asking people that you're going to see some numbers and letters appear on the screen, besides my name, I guess, and that will tell you ways that you can contact us, and you can give us advice, suggestions, question us, criticize us, degrade us. You can try to negate us if you want to. And the numbers you'll see on the screen here are phone number and email, and you can also stop by Public Access TV at 206 Lafayette Street, and in care of the station, give us a message. And we may respond to it on the air, we may read it, you may see the text of your message on screen like they do on those fancy cable news shows. So the phone number to call is 339-7260 and leave a message for Iowa City Other News. Or you can email us at ic_@yahoo.com, or as I said before, stop by PATV and leave a message for us, 206 Lafayette Street in Iowa City, Iowa, 52240. I have been Adam Burke for Iowa City Other News. Where's the Outrage? Thank you for letting me be on the show today. Back to you, Elliot.
All right. Good stuff. Adam, thanks for the outrage. Now, in case any of you at home are wondering, why would I want to call up the show? Does anyone even listen? What happens after the Where's the Outrage? We wanted to follow up on a couple past ones. Last month, Greg Thompson talked about WSUI, how a show called Alternative Radio had been dropped, and he was concerned about that they were censoring dissent at the show. Well, now good things have happened at WSUI. This show called Alternative Radio has a regular spot on Sunday nights. He just informed us of this because it was in their last newsletter. So good stuff. Thanks for that, Greg. Also, we've got Rosemary Randolph, who came in last month to talk about the 6 community gardens around Iowa City. There are volunteers working in these community gardens. There's food coming up. Now is a great time to get involved. Thanks for coming on the show, Rosemary, and let's take a look at what those gardens look like now.
Other News, and my name is Kim Franz. I'm standing here with Dana Valentine, the director of the Crisis Center Food Bank. We're actually just here to ask her a couple of questions about what's going on here at the community garden. So who does all this go out to?
Well, they're community gardens, so it's available for anybody in the community to come and help us plant or harvest. The surplus from the gardens is distributed to the food bank, so the extra produce goes to families in need. But generally, they're open gate gardens, so anyone's welcome to come by to the 6 locations at any time.
Well, how would I get involved in being in the community garden, or maybe just volunteering at the food bank?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, both the food bank as well as the community garden program are entirely volunteer run. So we have a volunteer board that decides what to plant each year at the community gardens, and that membership is open to anyone who is interested in participating.
Gardens are looking good. The radio is sounding better. Please do call in. Let us know what you think. Criticize us. Get involved. Whatever. All right. Well, you know, before we leave today, I'd like just if you two could tell us about how we can learn more about the environment, get involved to support these great projects that you both have been talking about to improve the environment.
Great. Well, the community gardens is, again, something that Environmental Advocates has been involved with for a number of years, and so we've helped support that program for a number of years because we feel like having people grow their own produce close to home relates back to the transportation piece that we saw at the beginning, taking care of the land, relates to the water quality, et cetera, et cetera. So if you'd like to get involved with Environmental Advocates, we'd love to have you. At the end of the program, they're going to run a piece with name, address, phone number, mailing address, email address, so forth. But you could get a hold of me at my home phone, 338-5220, and I'd be glad to talk with you about Environmental Advocates. We're always looking for new members and new ideas of things to do.
And as Dell indicated, we have the iWater program, which is a public-private partnership, and it's iWater, all one word, and that website is www.iowater.net. We train people how to measure water quality, take a look at their streams. We travel around the state doing the trainings. I think we have some in the area in August. So if you get on the website, you can see the data that's already been collected. We sponsored a canoe trip down the Maquoketa River to pick trash out of the Maquoketa River, and I really encourage people that are interested in water quality to check out the iWater program.
Not only do they train you, but they give you the equipment to do all the water monitoring. So it's a wonderful program.
That's great. This sounds like great stuff. Get involved with environmental advocates. Get involved with iWater. Stop putting pesticides on your lawn. Get on the web and learn how to do ecological lawn care, mow high, mulch, stuff like that. One topic we didn't talk about much was energy. If you want to know more about that, look up iRenew, Iowa organization. They're at www.irenew.org. That's IRENEW. They've got a couple workshops coming up on domestic solar, hot water, straw bale houses, and more. If you want to bike more, get on your bike. Maybe do an alternative commute once a week. Go to Critical Masses. They're the last Friday of every month. It's a community bike ride. We meet at the Ped Mall last Friday of every month around 5 p.m. It's been a great show. I want to thank you both for coming on. All the information, I know I learned a lot, definitely, from all you had to say. I'll be rewatching the show on videotape afterwards, taking notes. Thanks for everyone that worked on this show. We've got Adam Burke, Steve Canner, Teresa Seeberger, Greg Thompson, Liz McDade, Carrie Wilson, and Kim France from the Garden. You've been watching Iowa City's Other News. Feel free to contact us with comments and questions, and also contact us if you're interested in getting involved in this news project. Learn more about environmental issues, and thanks a bunch for tuning in. We're going to close today with some footage from the 4th of July parade. The group, the People's Coalition, their theme was Freedom to Dissent.